Welcome to the Deschutes County Services Building and to our joint meeting of the Deschutes County Commission and the Bend City Council. I'll call our meeting to order for the Deschutes County Commission, and the mayor will call the city's meeting to order.
Sorry, I have a little family thing I have to pay attention to, but I am here calling the City of Bend Council meeting to order.
If you would, you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For any of those of you that haven't been to one of these before, this is a great opportunity for the county commissioners and staff to get to know, come on in, get to know the city councilors and the city staff. We always keep up somewhat on what's going on in the city through the news, et cetera, but it's nice to be able to talk about a lot of things. And then it's a good chance for the city, likewise, to hear about some of what we're doing. So we have a pretty full agenda today that we was kind of a group effort between the four of us here, actually, to come up with the topics, and there's a lot that we kind of share common ground and interests in. So we'll go through that. I don't know if there's copies of the agenda somewhere. I think we've got them here. I don't know if people out there.
And it's available online on the county's website, on the commissioner's website, so people can grab that.
If you want to do that. But anyway, our first thing will be introductions. So we're going to go around the table. The commissioners will introduce themselves, and then the councilors introduce themselves. So, Commissioner Dare.
Start with the county.
Good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Patty Adair. I live in Sisters, and I just returned from the Sisters EDCO meeting. So, and I want to say happy birthday to Justin.
And Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Tom Anderson, County Administrator.
And I'm Phil Henderson. I'm one of the county commissioners, live actually in Bend, and have for most of my time in Deschutes County.
And Tony DeBone, Deschutes County Commissioner. We had quite a busy meeting this morning. This is my third meeting in the building already. We had Project Wildfire first thing this morning. We were over at the 911 district with our managing board, and then the MPO meeting was today here. So welcome to Deschutes County.
And for counselors, I'd like you to introduce yourselves. In this packet, at the back of this packet, is actually a list of all the assignments that counselors cover, in addition to two additional assignments that we have, which is community planning, which is for counselors, and then stewardship, which is for counselors as well. So I would like, starting with Bill, if that's all right. If you could start by introducing yourself, and then two assignments. We have a lot of different committee assignments that most intersect with the work that the county's doing. Want some time, we can have Justin do that.
Sure. Yeah, Justin Livingston, and probably the ones that most interact with the county. For me, there's a few of them on here that I'm on, but Local Public Safety Coordinating Committee is one that I sit on. That just came onto that committee this year, and then also our Southeast Area Plan, so which is an expansion area for our urban growth boundary as we kind of plan for that lands that were in the county that are now in the UGB, and how those are going to come into the city and be serviced by city services.
Chris?
Yeah, Chris Piper, City Councilor. And the committee that I sit on, is same as Justin and with Tony and Barb, is the Bend MPO. And then I just became an alternate to Mayor Russell for COCO. Just had my first meeting with COCO yesterday. And so that's it.
And COCO is?
Central Oregon Cities Organization.
That was the test.
I know my acronyms. Yeah.
Bruce?
Yeah, Bruce Abernethy. It's my second stint on the Bend City Council. Two of the committees that I serve on, I see Patty a lot. We both are representatives of a COIC, that obviously looks at sort of transit, community and economic development, and housing as well. The other one would be the Regional Solutions Team, which is a quarterly meeting, again, looking at economic development, wildfire, transportation, other risk management issues, things that will be covered later today.
Hi, Jenna Goodman Campbell. Good to see you all. So I'm the liaison to the Citywide Transportation Advisory Committee, and I am, along with Bruce, the liaison to the the Climate Action Steering Committee.
Barb Campbell. I serve on the Bend City Council and my second term on the City Council. I also serve on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which by necessity is also Deschutes County. And then Central Oregon Area Commission for Transportation is another one where it's not just Deschutes County, it's also Crook County, it's the entire Central Oregon. And then I'm going to cheat and mention a third one, which is such an all-hands-on-deck thing that I would like to mention, Affordable Housing Committee that Justin and I both serve on. And wow, if there was any, group effort we could do with county and city on that, it's just such a big problem for our residents. Thank you.
Bill?
Sure, Bill Mosley. I think the assignment that most intersects is the Rural Fire Protection Board. The other ones are more within the city itself.
So Sally Russell, Mayor of Bend, and I serve on the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project, which dovetails with my an invitation from Governor Brown to serve on the statewide Oregon Fire Council. So lots of regional and statewide intersection, and Phil and I serve on that, the Deschutes Collaborative together.
Yeah.
And then
Eric?
just Eric King, City Manager for Bend.
Oh, Mary. Thank you.
And so I forgot to have our commissioners maybe highlight one or two of your committees you're on that have a lot of interest with the city. Mr. Bone?
So I've been making an effort to be involved at VDAB, just getting to the meetings and having relationships with everybody. I was on the EDCO board for many years and Southern Deschutes County SLED board, but that's been my commitment recently, is to make sure I'm at the VDAB meeting. So that, just so you know that. Also, at a higher level, Association of Oregon Counties, there's 36 counties and there's leadership there. We're going to be doing a recruitment of the director. So just like a city is part of the League of Oregon Cities, we're part of the Association of Oregon Counties. And, it's just the different layers of government.
And so one of the important things that I serve on this year is on Central Oregon Health Council, which affects Jefferson, Crook, and Deschutes County. It's an enormous responsibility. I've been very happy to serve on that, and I'm also now on the Behavioral Health Council, which will be meeting on Thursday. So that's something significant. Just went to Salem to meet with the head of the Oregon Health Authority on continuing our funding for our behavioral health program that the federal government hopefully will be sending us, the state of Oregon, $80 million. We need that confirmed in another month, I believe, October.
And I guess a couple of committees, one that Mayor Russell mentioned, the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Projects, the whole breadth of the forests in Deschutes County. The federal government owns about 80% of the county land, and so all the cities are impacted by the issues of forest management, fire, forest use, et cetera. And that's been an interesting committee. And then also I'm involved in the economic development of both Southern River Pine Economic Development Committee and Redmond Economic Development Committee. So it gives a breadth to what's going on in Bend and what's going on elsewhere in the county for economic development.
Right.
So I think another thing we were going to talk about on this was specifically, we talked about a couple of committees that you had that are, I forget what committees they were.
The council
but-
has tried something a little different this year. I
Yeah.
just wanted to inform
Yeah.
the county board. We have two subcommittees of council. Mayor Russell alluded to it earlier. It's one focused around community building. That's really implementing our growth plan. So growth and housing are really, some of that policy work is taking place with three counselors, and that includes Mayor Russell, Councilor Livingston, and Councilor Goodman Campbell. And then we have another subcommittee, and the title of that is Stewardship. And this really is a variety of projects that involve partnership agencies.
county being one of them. So we're going to be talking about wildfire resiliency, which is on our agenda for today. We're talking about that same topic in the city. Also homelessness, mental health issues, things that are affecting our first responders. Those are all items that are on our council goals and related work plan. And that stewardship committee includes Councilor Campbell, Councilor Abernathy, and Councilor Piper.
And those are new?
Those are new. They meet once a month and we rotate them. So it's something that we're trying as we just get into some pretty deep policy work, and we just needed to manage our business meetings more effectively as they're getting long, and we meet in the evening, so it's another opportunity to engage counselors.
And really prepare them at a depth with input, direct input from counselors to really do a lot of the vetting. So hopefully by the time it gets to the council level, so it's a bit of a test, so that we can move it more quickly through the system and have a path, hopefully, that we think will work with the community as well as with our entire council.
And did you end up doing the breakdown to, I guess, is there 3 members per committee? So you're able to kind of have more discussion with a smaller group instead of trying to do it all.
Right. They're still publicly noticed meetings,
Live on
and
TV.
they have opportunity for public comment. But yeah, it's just a little bit more of a workshop kind of format. Yeah.
We have involvement from the
Committees.
From the, split the workload a little bit.
Kind of in between a work session and a full-blown meeting where you get you get sort of the best of both worlds. You don't have the quorum. There's no guarantee that if 3 people support something, but it's a pretty good indication that that's likely to be able to move forward.
So the next thing I think on our agenda is the growth in housing. We've got a variety of topics. The first one we have is the county non-resource land work plan, and I think Nick and Peter are going to tell you a little bit about what we've been dealing with as a county. Obviously, we don't have the same opportunity for housing, and the urban things in Oregon, urbanization has been controlled by the state land use, but we are thinking about what lands we have outside the boundaries of the cities that have little other practical value in terms of farm or forest, and I guess we're going to talk about what we've done so far and some of the headwinds we have for that, and like Barb, when you mentioned that being a big issue, it is for the whole county really, and it's very challenging at all levels to try to make that change. So,
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Russell stepped out, but members of City Council. I'm Peter Gutowski, Deschutes County's planning manager, and I'm joined by Nick Lelak, the community development director. Just for context, over the last 10 years, Deschutes County has participated and supported a series of legislative processes and coordinated with the Department of Land Conservation and Development to study and look to legislative ways that farm and forest lands could be redesignated. Unfortunately, those efforts over the last 10 years have not led to any changes in state law. So this past spring, with direction from the Board of County Commissioners, staff initiated 2 amendments to our comprehensive plan. And the first one was to identify opportunities to redesignate 6 areas that are committed to residential development. And these are areas that were pre-platted or conveyed property prior to the statewide planning system coming into effect for Deschutes County. And for the mayor and city councilors, you're probably familiar with one of these 6 areas. As you drive to Tumalo Falls, you will drive past Skyline Subdivision. And there's actually 2 subdivisions there, Skyline Subdivision and First Edition. It's zoned with a very restrictive forest use zone that is determined by the state. And you have to, any type of building permit or single-family dwelling permit requires land use approval. Well, as everybody knows, it's a residential subdivision that has residential infrastructure. Lot sizes are just over an acre in size. And what the board wants to do, or through the policies that set it in motion, would be to redesignate this area, not to allow new land divisions, but to allow single-family homes and accessory structures to be allowed outright. There's about 20% of that area is undeveloped, and right now, to get a single-family dwelling permit is several $1,000s. And so there are 5 or 4 other areas in our county that have this legacy designation, where in Skyline Subdivision's case, that was a subdivision that was platted in the late 60s. So the second amendment that is being proposed are to establish eligibility criteria consistent with state law that would allow exclusive farm use and forest use zone properties to be redesignated to non-resource lands. In Deschutes County, we're terming that non-prime resource lands. So this matter is currently being reviewed by the Deschutes County Planning Commission. They had a hearing in May, a second one in June. However, their review is on hold, looking potentially for direction from the board tomorrow. And this is because there's significant developments with the state's undefined non-resource lands program. So this is the news that was reported by the Bulletin on Sunday. But earlier this month, appeals by the Department of Land Conservation and Development, Thousand Friends of Oregon, and other organizations compelled the Land Use Board of Appeals to remand non-resource lands amendments that were proposed by Douglas County. Douglas County proposed a new comprehensive plan designation, a new zone, that if it was in effect through subsequent processes, it would have allowed potentially up to 22,000 acres of land to be redesignated. And without getting into the specifics of the LUBA decision, the remand now creates tremendous uncertainty, and it appears unlikely that if counties go forward with their own eligibility criteria to address these lands that are mischaracterized for farm or forest lands, that if there's an appeal, it will be very difficult to prevail. And the unintended consequence really from this decision, from this remand, is that without rulemaking defining state law, it just opens up so many issues to legal objections. And to tie it back to my opening remarks, this is something that Deschutes County had been respectfully requesting from the legislature, from DLCD, from LCDC for over 10 years, and we didn't make any headway. So tomorrow, there's a work session item with the board where staff has offered several options for addressing this issue. The first option is to go forward with the amendments, recognizing that we'll likely need to amend the policies and amend our burden of proof to take into consideration the Douglas County LUBA remand. The second option is to withdraw the amendments, recognizing the uncertainty. And this ties into the third option, which would be to engage the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the Land Conservation and Development Commission in September, in concert with the Association of Oregon Counties, to respectfully request rulemaking. LCDC meets in late September in Tigard, and there's an opportunity for discussion purposes is to mobilize those affected counties and respectfully request that LCDC, as they consider prioritizing their work plan, elevate this matter pertaining to non-resource lands. The other option, and again, you can combine these in so many different ways. The other option that we've introduced to the board is to apply for a technical assistance grant through the Department of Land Conservation and Development that would allow staff, if awarded, to develop a work plan that would allow us to update our comprehensive plan. And with that type of opportunity, you could examine non-resource land opportunities in relationship to other noteworthy land use elements. So I'll stop there. I don't know if you want to offer any comments or perspectives.
Thank you, Peter. The comments I'll make, number one, is Deschutes County is trying to get ahead of this issue. This issue is already happening. Those of you that are familiar with Section 11, the Department of State Lands has already demonstrated that we don't have all correctly designated lands in Deschutes County. Section 11 went through this, DSL, Department of State Lands, went through this process and changed over 600 acres from EFU, agricultural designation, to MUA in order to position themselves to be in the city of Bend. So the state of Oregon has already demonstrated to Deschutes County that all land is not correctly designated, number one. So this would help us get in front of that issue. To tie the issue directly to the meeting that we have today, one of the outcomes of our approach could be to preserve large blocks of undeveloped land around the city of Bend to protect that land for future urbanization, so it's not all fragmented and we're not just continuously responding to property owners that want to take 40, 60, 80, 100 acres and carve it up into all 10 acres in certain blocks. We would like to have more control of that so we could help protect the city of Bend future land supply, which of course is critical to the city's long-term future. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So any city councilors have any questions? We're going to talk about this at length, and we have already as commissioners, but. Do you have
Of
any
those
specific
approaches,
questions?
of those different approaches, options that you outlined, which one is most likely to result in that scenario that you just referred to of being able to better respond to and protect some land for future development?
Our hope was the eligibility criteria, which basically we're just taking the process established in state law today, which is largely undefined, and it's kind of we work with property owners to try to understand what the criteria are for them to address, like Section 11 and others on the east side of Bend. But the outcome of that process wouldn't just be an MUA 10 zone. It could be whatever we call it, a non-prime resource lands 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever the larger block is in whatever the distance is, the buffer is with the city of Bend. So that's one approach. Of course, there are other approaches to achieve that, but that was one of our intended outcomes with this, was to identify what would be the appropriate minimum lot size around Bend to protect it for future urbanization.
And if I may, there was a fellow that the Department of Land Conservation and Development hired to more or less audit the non-resource lands program statewide. And 25% of successful redesignations of farmland have occurred in Deschutes County. And I think 3, maybe 4 of those, I think 3 have occurred on the city's eastern flank. And the default process has been to change exclusive farm use zone property to multiple use agricultural 10. And from a policy conversation, staff was, mindful that the last thing Bend needs is to see rural parcelization on your eastern flank, knowing you already have it with Deschutes River Woods. We're already seeing it on the west side with the West Side Transect. And so this non-prime resource lands project, as we conceptualized it, had the potential to create a different zone that had a larger minimum parcel size to the extent that you wanted to allow some development opportunities while ensuring that enough land remained available for urbanization. So those were some of the topics and the concepts and the policies that we were introducing for the public process.
Yeah, go ahead. We have time for one more.
Okay.
We're in this really tight.
Because
I know the city wants to be done by 3, but we're 5. Yeah.
Would it be zoning or urban area reserve? What would be the mechanism to protect that land in your eyes?
Oh, great question. Urban area reserve would probably be the best approach, because you could both protect it and you could protect future transportation corridors among other avenues. We wouldn't be able to upzone it per the urban area reserve. Should a property owner apply, the county couldn't legislatively do it once that were adopted. So I would think the urban area reserve would be the best
Provides the most
approach,
protection.
the most protection for the cities.
All right.
So, thank you.
City staff.
All right. So related, city urban growth boundary work plan.
Okay, let's see. Good afternoon. My name is John Skidmore. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the City of Bend. And I have a team of folks here that are going to walk through the next few agenda items. Let me just pull up I think this is it, yeah. Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. There we go. Oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I have a problem. The feed store can't sell hay. He said they can't sell it because they're in the old mill district. Does that sound crazy? I needed to buy some alcohol the other day, And they said they are not allowed to sell it. They'll at least have shavings. But they're up like off of Wilson, you know? Is that like crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trish. Oh, and that's, okay, even though they're up the hill from.
Yeah, I know.
It's just a bill. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And no smoke, right?
Trish didn't ask me to do this, but, yeah. Just like 20, you know. Yeah, I know, they said 20.
Flying from Chicago and never leave on that new.
Why don't we dive in? Brian, you might need to ad-lib here, but who knows, maybe it's going on. So I think a common theme that both the county and the city are dealing with is really the fast pace of growth in Central Oregon. And a lot of our planning efforts have really been focused on how do we keep pace with it, how do we get out in front of it, how do we prepare for growth that we know is coming. And from the city's perspective, we spent the better part of the last decade, maybe decade and a half, of spending time doing a lot of land use planning, a lot of infrastructure planning, a lot of planning for economic development programs. And I think it's safe to say I'd say we're in full-blown implementation mode at this point. We have been investing in all types of infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, working through policies and other incentives to get the types of needed housing we need in town to serve our populations, as well as economic development programs to try to incentivize the type of employment lands and employment opportunities we'd like to see within the city of Bend. So for starters, Brian Rankin is with our long-range planning group. He was going to walk us through really the implementation of our urban growth boundary plan that's outlined in the decision as well as our comprehensive plan. So take it away.
First, I'd like you to imagine the most beautiful presentation ever. All of you would just be astounded right now. No, don't put it up now. No, it's just PowerPoint. It's not Prezi. It doesn't draw you in and out and confuse you. So we'll just, maybe I can move this and get a little more. No, never mind. Yeah. I'm Brian Rankin. I'm the manager for our long-range planning program at the City of Bend. Thank you, Commission, and thank you, City Council, for getting together today and letting us all have a good discussion. So I was here primarily to talk about what the city's doing to implement our growth plan. And the growth plan was something that we call the adoption of the 2016 UGB expansion and the whole package of amendments that went along with that adoption process. So as folks know, we added about 2,300 acres to our urban growth boundary. It's a mix of housing and employment in different locations around the city. And also, part of that action was to create the opportunity to go up in the core of the city. So what the City Council has done over the last couple of years through their goal-setting process and their strategic plan is to say, okay, well, how do we get this kind of development to occur? It doesn't just happen on its own. So a lot of the focus of the city staff and City Council have been, how do we work this plan? How do we jumpstart development inside and outside the UGB that as a result of this growth plan that was approved in 2016? So the last, I think it was not this previous goal setting, but the prior goal setting, the City Council said, we'd like you to do a couple big projects, one on the inside of the city, in the core of the city, and then one in one of the UGB expansion areas. So the Growth Management Department is a pretty small department, about 10 folks, including the MPO, and we are primarily planners, long-range planners of different stripes and expertise. So we have 3 projects run in our department. One is a transportation system plan update, an MPO plan update. Karen Swersey is going to speak to that in a later agenda item. And then the 2 I'll speak to today are the core area plan and the southeast area plan. So the southeast area plan, we'll start there with the expansion area. Down the southeast, I think Commissioner Henderson probably knows this area well. Down by Knott Landfill, the new high schools that are going in down there. The city added, I want to say it was around 400 acres of land, a mix of industrial, mixed employment, and residential uses down in that area. So the purpose of this plan is to help this UGB expansion area move along faster and get it ready for development. So we have a plan, we have a UGB expansion, but oftentimes, and we've learned this from other cities, is the land will just sit there because it faces big challenges, infrastructure challenges, for example. Maybe we didn't quite get the zoning designations right. Maybe the boundary of those designations didn't make sense or could be improved. So the Southeast Area Plan is all about working with the neighborhood, the landowners down in this area, and saying, okay, let's really talk about this. How do we take the same group of land uses and a framework level transportation plan and a framework level sewer and water plan to make that more of a reality? So we're making changes to those land uses to make sure the neighborhood likes it, to create a complete community, more or less keeping the balance of land uses that we establish in the UGB. And then how do we also make some adjustments to the road network? So we have a framework road network out there. But what we found, for example, is that maybe we don't need this extra collector road. So let's do this kind of road instead. So we're involving neighbors, we're involving local residents, and we're getting folks to get agreement on what this place is going to look like, how it's going to function over time. The other part of this project that's exciting to me that we're not quite there yet, we're almost there, is once we get agreement on the framework level transportation and land use concepts, we'll then move into how to finance. Okay, how are we going to pay for this infrastructure? So what's the total amount of infrastructure? How might we look at different agreements between different landowners to figure out how to pay for this? How might we phase the development in this area? All with the hopes of developing a community that everybody really loves and becomes its own unique place in Bend. I will say that the work is very exciting. Folks are really active. The landowners. I think Justin, you're in these meetings, so you get to see it firsthand. But people are passionate. We're finding really good refinements, so we're excited, and that should end up being completed in the spring of 2020. The next project is the core area plan, and this one is it's really fun. It's complex. First of all, it's something that we think is pretty unique. It has a lot of different elements, and we're pulling together in one project that is really phased. So the area I'm talking about here is I'll use our local landmarks. So we have Blockbuster to the north. This is really in the center of the city. Blockbuster, Miller Lumber. We have Crux, the box factory area. Folks are familiar with that. The eastern part of downtown, and then Inner Highway 20 as well. So the study area is this large area, and we're asking a couple questions there. So we know we've upzoned this area to allow for mixed-use development, 4 to 7 story. That's new. But again, that doesn't just happen on its own. We haven't seen a lot of that kind of development, if any, of that nature actually hit the ground in that location yet. So the question is, how do we encourage this kind of development, but at the same time keep Bend unique, keep Bend? How do we also help existing businesses thrive and grow in this area? So we're looking at a couple different parts to this plan. One, we look at an urban design framework. So what's this place going to be when we start looking at redevelopment and in 20, 30 years? The big issue there is east-west connectivity, making better connections between east and west and north and south in this area so people can get around through a variety of modes in this area. The kinds of projects that we're looking at in terms of getting there would be improvements to streetscape, things like public art, public spaces, green spaces, working with parks on that. So we're looking at kinds of projects that you would need in order to create that urban environment. A whole bunch of different projects. And then there are also programs that you could do for different landowners and business owners, for example. Maybe we have a program that would allow a business to get a loan at a low interest rate or a grant, something like that, to help do some storefront improvements or improve their existing business there if they're feeling a little bit like it's a little bit difficult. So providing some incentives there. And this is all being done with the intent of also examining whether or not some of this area in the core should be part of a new urban renewal district. So we're doing a little bit of planning with this urban design framework and saying what could this place be and what do we need to get there? And then also, What about a new urban renewal district? Where would that be? What's the boundary? And then how much tax increment financing could be available over time to fund some of the things we just talked about? That project is also midway. So all of our projects are about kind of the 50% done range. They'll finish up in the spring of 2020. Ultimately, some of the decisions that will come out of the core area plan would be, should we form an urban renewal district? If so, where? That's a decision that the City Council will make as BURRA, the Bend Urban Renewal Agency. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Do you consider the core development, is that part of your urban growth boundary work plan, or is that a separate?
It's all part of the same. So to explain this, as you expand an urban growth boundary, DLCD, the statewide planning rules, require you to make efficient use of land. It's one of the factors you have to consider before you go out. So the way this manifests, essentially the state says, well, you prove it to us that you can't essentially get more urbanization inside your urban growth boundary before you expand. So this was an effort to essentially say, okay, these are the areas in Bend that have the most opportunity to change over time and support more infill and redevelopment. Not every place in Bend. So we tended to concentrate our assumptions on where redevelopment would occur in certain areas instead of assuming a blanket kind of level of redevelopment. So all of this was, I would say, a little bit inside, a little bit outside. More outside than inside in terms of what we assumed would accommodate our future growth. But this is an area we need for needed housing and job growth.
Any other questions? Now, are we broken down for all shows? I mean,
Broken down. We've got it organized.
Yeah.
They're going to present over here. I'm going to try to restart it.
okay. Just wondering if we usually have good PowerPoints, so.
So Nick's going to reboot that, and I'll talk from here.
Okay.
Again, my presentation was unbelievable. But since you can't see it, we'll just,
apologize if the others were supposed to be.
So I'm Russ Grayson. I'm the director of the Community Development Department for the city. Just to give the county a little perspective, Brian has a staff of 10 in the growth management. Our CDD department's about 90 people. We process about 7,000 permits and applications a year. 14,000 people come to our front counter every year, and we do about 150 to 250 building inspections a day. That's our activity level within the city. What I'm here to talk about is kind of just what's going on with growth within the city, what we're seeing, and also some of the code updates that we are looking at doing this year. As Brian mentioned, we're preparing for a different type of development. In fact, you're starting to see it in Bend now. So if everyone's familiar with where the Ray's Supermarket is, it's now called the Westside Village, which we call a podium-type building, 5 residential stories over commercial retail. We're starting to see more of those type of buildings come in now and having a lot more discussions about that. Council has a very aggressive goal for the next biennium of trying to get 3,000 residential units on the ground. That's about 1,000 more than our standard growth is right now. We came out of the recession very steeply, and we've kind of leveled off, which we are expecting. But council, because of our housing shortage, has an aggressive goal out there to try to get more units on the ground, and we're working with council to be able to do that. With that, one of the slides that we were going to show, but I'll just kind of use my hands because I've always said people say I talk with my hands. I know the county's interested in ADUs. We looked at accessory dwelling units were a hot topic for the city for coming out of the recession of how do we get different type of housing on the ground, and we were staying relatively low and flat in the permitting levels, and we started coming in and doing a series of code changes to try to help move the dial on that, because we knew there was interest, but there was also some barriers, whether it was sidewalk construction or entitlement processes that occurred. So if you looked, it kind of stayed level, made a code change, not much happened, made another code change, a little something happened. Then in 2015, we removed the conditional use requirement from ADUs, and we saw an immediate spike in ADUs. And so one of the goals of the Community Development Department over the next couple of years is to continue to tweak our development code to try to incentivize certain type of housing types and certain type of development in areas that is in conformance with our comprehensive plan and the city council goals. So with that, I'll just go real quickly through some of the packages we're putting together, and then I can answer any questions that you might have. So one of the first things we're doing
is we are looking at our transportation analysis mobility standard requirements within the city. We call it Chapter 4.7 of the Development Code. The City Council initiated with their last budget $30 million to infrastructure, specifically around a lot of targeted intersections that had been a big problem with the city for a long time on the development side. If you think of Columbia and Simpson, F and Purcell, 27th and Connors. And with that, we're looking at, well, should we adjust our transportation requirements for developers on what they need to look at and the mobility standards that we have in town in the near term to try to help development go forward, not only just in terms of what their mitigation might need, but also time in which it takes to get a development through our process. Then next, we're looking at certain housing packages that will be coming through. We're looking at tweaking our cottage code development. We have seen a couple cottage codes come forward within the city. And with like any other code package, there's always tweaks and modifications. We're looking at that. A shared court type of concept where you have a lot of houses fronting a short court private street. We're looking at changes to our neighborhood commercial uses and also potential minor changes to the permitted uses out in Juniper Ridge. That's one code package that'll be coming through council. Our next one has to do a lot with what came out of the recent legislative package with the state. I'm sure everyone's heard of House Bill 2001, which now allows fourplexes within residential zones outright. We're going to have to tweak our code to figure out how we want to implement that within the city. We also have to remove the parking requirement for ADUs, which is going to be another tweak to the ADU code. We'll probably see another bump up in that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how different is what the Bend had already done on the rezoning versus the 2001 legislation? How much?
So we had already made some tweaks to our code for duplexes and starting to look at triplexes, but they were in certain areas with certain lot sizes. We were thinking of bringing forward a package on fourplexes. We held until the state, trying to figure out what the state did. Fourplexes in a standard residential zone is a new concept. And we're now trying to figure out how we want to implement that based off of what we're receiving from, what the state passed in House Bill 2001. So we were already heading down this road. In fact, Colin Stevens, who's our planning manager, had a package kind of ready to go, and then we kind of heard that the state was taking this on, so we held back to try to figure out what was going to come out from that state package. Now that we have that legislation, we're trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean to us, our code, and the changes that need to happen within our code to implement that House bill. The other one we're working about was more specific to Bend, was House Bill 3450, which is allowing, is that 40 acres of multifamily in commercial areas. We're trying to figure out how to implement that. That was kind of targeted for Bend, the way that bill is written, and we were heavily involved in that. We're kind of excited to see how that's going to be implemented. Another House bill we're working on is 2306, which is around substantial completion. The idea is that the home builders want to be able to pull more permits as quickly as they can prior to the projects being completely done and accepted by the city. That was, again, state legislation that we worked with, and we're going to have to tweak some of our codes to figure out how to implement that. We're going to bring forward a discussion with council to see if we want to look at tiny homes in a different way again, as well as single-room occupancy types of development. And then also, we're working very closely with Brian and his group with the core area study that he was talking about with infill in the middle of town, because we already know of some code changes that need to occur with that, but there may be more recommendations to tweak the code to help incentivize the type of development and kickstart that area. And then we continually go through updates of our code with our interactions with all the people we get to visit with at our front counter and all the projects we deal with around how do we update our procedures, or can we remove barriers from the process. We're looking at maybe removing conditional uses from housing types that we have within our code there's some recent requirements around clear and objective standards for residential type developments that we've been working with legal on to figure out how to implement that. We're probably going to revise our solar standards as well. We're looking at doing that within the next 6 to 12 months. And then after that, we're looking at we're thinking about doing a significant audit to our development code to try to streamline that and make that more effective. All that while we're also implementing a new permitting system and being one of the fastest jurisdictions in the country in growth. So besides that, nothing's going on. Couple other notes of just development going on within town. The hospital just completed a $45 million expansion to their facility. OSU is about ready to start their next building next year. We just provided a certificate of occupancy for the new elementary school that's going to open on Cooley, and the high school is under construction down in the southeast part of town. And the first annexation area is about ready to start turning dirt on the west side within the coming weeks. And we're also talking with the other property owners around the different expansion areas to figure out how to get them moving as well. So with that, stand for any questions.
Could I ask, it's not an expansion area, opportunity area in the central, right over there. Is it really going as quickly as the ones as the expansion areas? When are we going to be turning dirt in that opportunity area?
We know we've talked to several owners in that area. They are watching very closely to see what's going on with that core area project and kind of what's going to happen with how we build infrastructure. A lot of things to think about when we develop these type of areas is how do we create a sense of place? We have a lot of developers and property owners that are interested in maybe moving forward with a building, but they're asking questions like, well, how would my residents get downtown easily? Is the streetscape there to support that? And that's a lot of the questions that Brian and his team are working on. What's interesting though is we are starting to see these types of buildings come in now that you would see in the central area, just in other parts of town. So we know that the market is shifting. I think a lot of people are watching the what we call the West Side Village, where the Rays was, to see kind of that's the bellwether for this new type of development, and they're watching closely to see how successful that is.
And then I'll just cover, I think we can kind of catch up on time here, the public-private partnership opportunities real quickly. We are taking a different approach where we're asking the development community, what are those barriers to getting more housing units and more employment land developed? And so we'll be putting out a request for information to engage, and then be looking to council to help us maybe move some of our CIP projects around or address some code deficiencies to help incentivize those projects moving forward. So we're hoping that we'll get some of the large production folks, but as well as some of the more mom and pop development too, of what can we do to meet our housing goal of 3,000 units over the next two years. So you'll be seeing that in the next couple of weeks. Actually, we have our subcommittee meeting next week to kind of finalize that approach, but that should be going out in terms of the public-private partnership opportunity. And then in terms of infrastructure investment, we covered it a little bit with Russ's presentation, but yeah, council allocated about $30 million to our transportation CIP to help just move things along from a development entitlement process to remove some of those barriers. So. And then lastly, I think we want to talk about House Bill 4079, and that's the affordable housing pilot project that Bend received. Now Redmond, both Bend and Redmond have been successful in the recent legislative changes. So,
can I ask a question before? I know you're trying to catch up on time. Sure. So the mom and pop developers, we heard the county is looking at the expansion areas and if I understand what they're trying to do, they're trying to keep that area from being divided up into a bunch of smaller parcels so that it's easier to bring in urban area reserve, right? Mm-hmm. Does that mean in the future we're just giving up on mom and pop? Do you see what I'm saying? That the small parcels are where is where mom and pops are able to work.
It's nuanced, and like for example, we want parcelization in that core because
right?
It already is parcelized.
It's already there, and it's kind of good for our small developers.
But we talk about on the expansion areas,
yeah.
There's significant infrastructure, and it's helpful to be able to preserve some of that land to get in roads and
right. Oh, okay.
So it's just a different development pattern.
Okay. Thank
you.
Until
it's urbanized, and
then we can parcelize it, and then our little mom and pop developers can still have the opportunity. Yep. Thank you. Okay.
So, commissioners and councilors, my name is Lynn McConnell. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager for the City of Bend. Good to see you all. Here to talk about House Bill 4079. We spoke about a year ago, I guess, with the commission about this, and council has been following along as well. Wanted to show you, again, just very brief overview, our parcel. I don't know if you guys can all see the TVs, but it looks like we're back up and running. This parcel is bordered by Highway 20 on the north end and Bear Creek on the south. It's about 30 35 acres, and it will be master planned. You can see that that's not quite a perfect square. There's a little triangle cut out of the northwest corner. That's 2 acres that came in under our traditional UGB expansion, but that will be master planned in for a total of about 37 acres. One of the biggest differences between our proposal and Redmond's is that this is a privately owned parcel. So while Redmond is using their city land, this was a private developer and owner that we've been working with, and they've been very much part of the process and really helping with a lot of the decisions that have been made about this. So we're raring to go and starting to put the pieces in place, and expect that we'll be working on this together quite a bit in the future. Just as a very brief overview, the proposal that we have submitted to the state and that we expect to master plan next includes about 241 units of deed restricted affordable housing for folks making 60% AMI and under. That's roughly $50,000 a year for a family of 4, and that could equate to about $1,200 a month in rent for those folks. We also have 155 middle income units. That's for the 81 to 120% AMI levels. I'm going to keep this really high level, but I'm happy to answer questions about AMI and how all that works after if you're interested. So again, that's our middle income group, about 155 units for that. And then we'll have 80 premium lots, so that's what's helping to subsidize the rest of the development, as well as a little bit of commercial space that's really geared just to serve that neighborhood, not necessarily Highway 20 traffic. We also have about a 6-acre park in there in partnership with Parks and Rec, and you can see some of our partners, existing partners. You guys are all on that list, as well as quite a few private and public sector partners. So are waiting for our final order from the state. I have been promised that it's close to or in the mail, but we're proceeding because we've gotten the final authorization for DLCD to start moving forward. So we have 4 steps coming up from this that we will work jointly on. That is our UGB expansion, our comprehensive plan amendment, our master planning, and annexation. So there's a little bit of discussion between staff on both sides to get all of that ready for each of you, but we're working towards it, and that's a very rough schedule of what we're expecting. Right now, we are not under any time obligations with the state, but as soon as we go through expansion, then the clock starts ticking. And once we've annexed, we have a 5-year window to get it built out. With financing for affordable housing being what it is, that's honestly my biggest concern, is just getting the money that we need to help finance the affordable development going forward. And we have an obligation to the state to phase it in such a way that the affordable is built at the same time as the market rate. So that's the brief overview of 4079. You can do one more advance and then questions as appropriate. And just so you know, these are all affordable developments that exist in the city of Bend right now.
So this was an interesting project because this was land that was zoned EFU.
Yes.
It had to be converted to MUA 10 originally, which we did as a county because it was going to be a cluster development, and then it came in as this project. It sounds like you've actually added units since we first saw this proposal, and you've added another tier of housing. So that's great, I think, from our perspective. That's, I think, what Redmond's trying to do also, is have a variety of tiers and see what the market supports. And so that's great that you're moving forward on it. Do you actually have then draft plans going and things?
Yeah, so this is, we have rough plans that we've submitted. Really what the state asked for was zoning maps, so that's what we have in place. We do still have to go through the full master planning process, so it's a little bit of chicken and egg, I think, in this specific instance, because there was legislative rules that had to be followed, and yet we're still starting the public process with the master planning.
For just that 37 acres?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's a lot of planning.
It is, but thank you for your support.
And it's our planning effort, even though it's private property.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. I mean, this one is pretty city intensive because of the way the rules were written. And of course, there will be a lot of intersection with the county and ensuring that we're all on the same page with that. But yes, because the city had to be engaged just for the purposes of this legislation, we're a little more, I guess, city engagement than maybe normally. Yeah.
Our last item we had on our agenda was, thank you very much for that. discussion of future growth plans and opportunities for coordination was supposed to be kind of a discussion between city and county. We're running up against our time clock, but I don't know if anybody has any specific thoughts. We have maybe a couple minutes to talk about that. And Commissioner DeBonne?
So we started off with our staff talking about the non-resource work plan, the UGB, and the projects here. One of the concepts is, just our land use in the state of Oregon. We're existing commissioners, city council, local people trying to just figure out what a path would look like, what it might make sense. And the statewide land use system it's getting more tense, more concrete as time goes on. And I'm referring to since 1973 and then 45 and 50 years later. Just acknowledging it, that's what I'm seeing over time in office for a little time. The fact that it's just getting more acute when we're trying to make decisions, and there has to be more resistance because we're coming up with more interesting ideas about, the second dwelling on a rural property or rezoning. We've got some of these rural resource lands, the farm and forest that we talk about. They've already been parcelized before land use. I got to imagine that at some point there was this subset of land out there. It was just kind of we were 90-something% done of all the zoning, and I'm referring to the early 80s when the zoning systems went in place in the state of Oregon. We were 90% done, and we just had to stop. Okay, well, let's just put the rest as resource, or let's just put it all on the shelf. We'll get back to it later. And I'm referring to the state and everybody here now. 80s, 90s, 2000s, this is 2019, and it's just more acute. So a statement that I've picked up in the frame of mind over time being in office.
So are you suggesting necessarily an opportunity? I mean, I think maybe the best use of this time, given our super tight agenda
It's just a
today,
statement.
is okay, and I'm just trying, so let's try to keep sort of focused and maybe, as we say some things, maybe park some ideas for the future, but not dig too deep into them today. If that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's important, and we've talked about it at council several times, to actually think about the future. And the city, within its own urban growth boundary process, was kind of perpetually behind. We had the appeal, and I think it was 6 years into the 20-year cycle before we actually got the whole thing approved. And now here we are 3 years after the approval, and we have some very large, expensive lots on the west side brought in, but that's about it so far. And we're making progress on some of the other ones, but it just takes so long under the system. We've made some substantial efforts on the city to actually catch up with that regarding transportation, some other projects. That's good. And I wish we would continue to make that push forward into the urban area reserve proposals and start to examine that together. We're going to delaying decisions about what's going to come in 10 or 15 years is just going to make these transportation land use projects even more expensive and create uncertainty. And so the farther we can get ahead with that, the better, probably.
Other thoughts? There's a lot to talk about here, and I think being aware of what you're doing in the city, and then you hearing kind of what we're trying to do outside the city. I mean, one of the ones we briefly talked about is there was legislation last session. They come up again about allowing ADUs throughout the rural areas in the county. That would be another housing option similar to in the city. And so we'll get, it's good for us to hear your experiences with things, and maybe we can work in smaller groups or talk about this more outside this meeting because it really is a county problem as well as a city problem. So.
I wonder if we could maybe use one of our subcommittees and invite some staff and commissioners and see and kind of get more into this sort of topic around kind of the next step of urban area reserve, future expansions, et cetera.
Yeah, so we're somewhat synchronized or working together. That'd be a great idea.
Move on?
Yeah, so we'll go on our next topic.
I'm sorry. Ed, so if I understand ADUs in the county, we're talking about county development, which means larger parcels, which right now are only allowed a single home.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then would be another ADU. It seems like from the state's perspective, they want those larger parcels eventually to redevelop to more than just a single-family home and an ADU. If we let that private owner, put that ADU, are we just digging that private owner further into a land use that later the state is going to come back in through us, honestly, yes, you know, and say, oh, no, 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 we want this acre to now be 6 homes and some duplexes and a quadruplex in there also. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think that depends on where it's at. I mean,
Yeah, right, exactly, and so that's my question, yeah, what other land do you have, right?
But if you're in Tumalo, no,
Uh-huh.
you're never gonna develop.
You're never gonna redevelop, and so that
The
ADU
pressure's
is.
probably the other way. On the further you get away from an urban area,
Uh-huh.
pressure's more in other parts of the state of farm communities saying we don't want additional housing
Uh-huh.
out in the rural areas,
Right.
rather than the state, so that there's more pressure to keep it, to not allow it because of that,
Mhm.
because it's kind of depurifying the land, the farm use in
Mhm.
the Willamette Valley, for instance. Whereas here, it's an option for housing we're a long way from the state trying to urbanize it, so I guess that would be, it's
Again, I
gonna,
guess
yeah.
one comment I would make on the rural ADUs is, just found out yesterday, Marion County somehow has figured out a way to do them. So I'm not sure how they're doing it, but it would be something to look into.
To me, that is just the perfectly normal development of farmland. You've got the farmer who starts it, and then they build, you know, we're calling it an ADU, but a small little home for the child who's now grown up but is also going to live on that farm. I myself started life on a house. My granny was on the same ranch. We had these 2 little homes that in this modern times might be considered to be an ADU size. And so it's just kind of strange to me that that's not just the normal way that this farmland develops.
Well, there was, at the last legislature, there was a lot of pushback. You know, we were advocates of that bill to allow that, each county to opt into that kind of to that option, and there was a lot of pushback by other people throughout the state about it. So not all counties look at their growth, I guess, the same way or
They
something.
can't
Yeah.
possibly, right, yeah. Thank you.
So we're,
Stabilization?
So, yeah, we're gonna talk on public safety is our next topic, and we're, our presentation, our stabilization center that might have been read about, we're planning it, and Holly's gonna do it. And the sheriff's here to join her. Good to see you, Sheriff.
Everyone. Hello. Now we get to see one of those great presentations.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know how great it is. Don't build it up too much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us on the agenda today. My name's Holly Harris. I'm a program manager at Health Services. And obviously, you know the sheriff.
Shane Nelson, Sheriff.
So I presented before you guys, I believe it was last year around this time on this project. And so really, this is a really high-level overview, again, of what the project is and then what steps we've accomplished to date. So as you remember, this is a collaborative project between the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office and Health Services. And really the goal of the facility from the beginning has been to develop a 24/7 crisis stabilization center with 23-hour respite and a sober station. So that's been our target goal. We are pretty much taking it chunks at a time at this point. And the overarching goals of why we want to do this project, or why we feel it's necessary, is to reduce the number of individuals who have a serious mental illness who are ending up in our criminal justice system. It's happening at alarming rates nationally, and it's happening here locally as well. The other goal is to reduce the number of individuals that are utilizing our emergency department for a mental health crisis. It's also to help people experiencing a mental health crisis to stabilize in our community, and to get connected with resources, engage in mental health treatment, and have a better quality of life going forward. And then lastly, to provide a place for law enforcement to quickly bring someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis so they can get back out on the street doing what they do best, protecting our community. So to date, some of the things that we've done to date is a number of site visits. We've, I think, all total, spent about 13 or 14 different sites that we've toured. Our Board of Commissioners have also done their own site visits, which has been incredibly helpful for the development of the project. We did receive approval from our Board of Commissioners not that long ago, so that's been a wonderful thing to help us move forward in this project. We have submitted for permits. On July 12th, we actually submitted for permits for the City of Bend. So we are in that process right now, awaiting on approval. We have developed a floor plan in partnership with architects and community partners, and our Board of Commissioners helped with that as well. We have developed a staffing model and determined our FTE needs, and developed a business plan. And the focus of that business plan is really to help educate our community partners and explore potential funding options going forward. We have met all of our capital requirements. Here's just a quick schematic of the outside of the building. It's not going to completely look like that. It kind of gives you an idea, though, of the building. Oops, uh-oh. Hold on. And here's the floor plan we created. It's hard to see up there, but we've spent a lot of time really being thoughtful around the floor plan and making sure not only it accommodates the general community that's going to walk in there and receive crisis services, but also our law enforcement partners so that they have a separate entrance that they can quickly go in and out, and those two things aren't intermingling. We also thought about children and families as we were developing this floor plan, making sure they have adequate space to be served, because we do plan to serve all ages of people. And then as you can see in the bottom there, the kind of 5 recliners would be where the 23-hour respite is. So it's really meant for short-term, brief crisis stabilization to get people's basic needs met, get them stabilized and connected with resources. So some of the things we've had happen over the course of this project, we've been awarded several grants. One of them recently was a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant, which is a $700,000 grant over the course of 3 years. And what that grant did for us was add a case manager who will also be a substance use counselor to the stabilization center. And then it will also add 20 hours a week of psychiatry, which is really important. Many times folks are overutilizing the emergency department or ending up in a mental health crisis simply because they haven't been able to access medication. So to be able to get them connected with that is a pretty huge deal. It also, what's not mentioned up here is we were able to contract with Oregon Health and Science University through this grant, who will then do extensive program evaluation and help us with that data collection piece to really tell the story. We were also awarded a SAMHSA grant, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, a 2-year grant. It was $2 million that was awarded, and $350,000 of that was set aside for the Stabilization Center for furniture and equipment. So timeline and next steps. Like I mentioned, we submitted for permits, and so we're waiting on the approval process for that. Remodeling is set to begin in October if all goes well with the permitting process, and our hope is to open spring of 2020. So March is our target date. So hopefully all goes well. You know how construction goes, so that's a soft date. We're also seeking additional funding to go 24/7 and be able to provide that 23-hour respite and sobering. So that's always going to be on our mind, trying to get that accomplished. Some of the ways we're doing that, we have applied for funding through the Central Oregon Health Council. So we will be going through that process to see if we can obtain any funds from that group. We will also be applying for some grant funds that I know are going to be coming out as it relates to Senate Bill 973, which was recently passed, which created a behavioral health justice reinvestment program. So there's going to be some grant opportunities which we will be applying for. In the meantime, what we're working on, we're just really working on our policies and procedures, standard operating procedures, our safety and security needs, our philosophy, and all of the logistics that go into opening a new facility. Do you have anything you want to ask?
Any questions before, I just want a couple of closing statements.
Where is it?
Oh, where is it? Good question. It is going to be located on the public safety campus. So just steps away from our sheriff's office. And that really helps with this piece of trying to keep folks from entering the criminal justice system who are experiencing a mental health crisis. So sometimes they do end up in our jail, being located near there, for them to be released from jail to come right over and get the support they need immediately. I think will be a great value. And then we're sharing resources with the sheriff's office, which is helping the project move forward, so being nearby and for safety reasons as well.
So what happens after 23 hours?
First of all, most crises resolve within 4 to 6 hours. So the 23 hours is the absolute maximum that somebody could stay without us having to go and become a licensed long-term facility. So once you hit the 24-hour mark, you really become like a residential facility, and that's not the model that we're wanting to do. We have a respite facility in Redmond called Brooks Respite that does kind of the longer-term respite for somebody who might need that. So if they stay with us, if their crisis doesn't stabilize within 23 hours, we'll be looking at a couple of things. Either hospitalization might be necessary, might be ready for that level of care, or maybe Brooks Respite might be an option, so we would help that person get over there. They would stay for a week or so, get stabilized, and then be connected to resources in the community.
I'm delighted to hear that your capital requirements are met. So I guess opposite of that would be, operating costs. What does a facility like this cost to run, and what have you learned from some of the other places that have been visited on how to keep, and balance cost efficiency with providing good quality services?
Right. Well, so the cost to run a 24-hour facility with 23-hour respite and a sober station is around an additional $2 million a year, so that we do not have. In addition to what we are currently budgeting, which is, sorry, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but they're, we're already at like well over $1 million for just our internal operating costs to do daylight hours. And so to do that next bump will require community support. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And I think it's important to recognize that the way this model started, it was a partnership in utilizing existing resources, because that's really a good way to start a project. And Health Services has done a great job doing that. They're relocating their services, and so that's a nice, easy way to roll it out. And I have no doubt this isn't going to become a very useful tool. And so I just want to say a couple more sentences, because it's always important to recognize the people that make this happen. And so first of all, I want to thank my bosses in the audience, the folks that live here, because community support has been key to moving this facility forward. And then I want to thank, you know, our law enforcement partners and public safety partners, but Mr. City Manager, Mr. County Administrator, City Council, and a big thank you to the County Commission. 4 years ago, we started these talks. Well, actually, we started them several years ago, but I'll say formally 4 years ago. And to see something moving forward, and a huge thanks to the County Commission for making the decision to remodel this building and stand behind it and support it. Thank you.
Any questions about that, or? I know that the city is, I think you heard about it before, but it will be serving both, you know, the sheriff's office, but also the police department in terms of people they come in contact with. And I think we have more kind of educated, intelligent law enforcement in our communities than other places we've been, actually, in terms of the preparation for this.
Do you have an estimate as to, I mean, it's one of these double-edged swords. Do you have an estimate as to how many people might be served over the course of a year?
Sure, that has been the golden question, and we've done our best to try to, you know, this is a new type of project in our community, so we have nothing to base it on other than just the data we've been able to pull from a variety of sources. And our estimates right now, I mean, once at a 24/7 facility, we estimate around at a minimum 10 people per day. You know, with our numbers that we're seeing now, we were just talking with Chief Porter about just the skyrocketing number of calls for mental health related calls for service. They're going up every day, and even we have a crisis walk-in clinic right now at the Health Services building, and I mean, we saw 10 people there just the other day. So I suspect that's a low-end number.
So this was funded, some of the original capital dollars is kind of the Tri-County Central Oregon Health Council vision. So it isn't just Deschutes County.
Right.
It can be a resource for Crook County and Madras, Jefferson. Yeah, mixing the cities and the counties up. But also we already have 24-hour coverage basically in mental health crisis. You know, public safety is 24 hours. We have crisis teams that are available on staff all the time. Just this facility currently isn't going to open up with the doors open 24 hours a day. It'll be an extended schedule. But, you know, if somebody's at, you know, right in the middle of the night and bouncing around and end up at the hospital, they could end up there first thing in the morning if that's the right place for them to be.
So our next topic is fire resiliency mapping.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Sheriff.
Hey, Nick, could you lower that a little bit more?
Just a little bit more.
I was like, oh, great. Nope, still getting me.
Or Carolyn, you can just
all
stay
the way.
there. Just stay right
Or
there.
just
Yeah,
stay
yeah.
Thank you.
So this next topic, while Nick's getting it queued up, this has to do, started out with there's a new building code in Oregon that allows for counties or cities to opt in for different kinds of structural building codes that are more fire resistant. And this has been approved at the state level, and I don't know if any cities or counties have approved it yet, but it gets connected to a fire resiliency map, which Nick's going to talk about, we're working on. So go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to see that we have some of our fire official partners here with us this afternoon. Ed Keith, our county forester, would also like to be here. This is really an internally collaborative process between the Community Development Department and County Forester, and then, of course, externally with builders, realtors, fire officials, homeowners associations, and others. And so where we're at this point is Mr. Chairman said, is to create an updated map. And we're beginning that process at this point by appointing a wildfire mitigation advisory committee. And that process is underway right now. The board expects to appoint 7 to 12 members. They will be meeting beginning this fall, as early as late next month, through the end of the year or into January. Applications, there's an application form online, and those applications are due next week. Next Monday, to be exact. They're going to recommend an updated map to the county's wildfire hazard map and zone per state law, and I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. They'll consider new building standards that Chair Henderson stated, and of course the City of Bend and the fire officials are aware of this. The Oregon Revised Specialty Code, it's known as R327.4. And the key is that we can only apply those standards in a wildfire hazard map and zone using the Oregon Department of Forestry. The ODF is what you see up there, the Oregon Department of Forestry criteria. I'll just summarize at a very high level what that is in just a moment. And then also consider new land use standards, not just recommendations or on a case-by-case quasi-judicial land use decision-making process. A couple of years ago in 2015, after the county completed our natural hazards mitigation plan update, the NHMP, we had additional money from FEMA, and we partnered with the University of Oregon's Community Service Center to conduct an audit of our development code, and they did that, and they provided a report to us with some recommendations of what we could do to strengthen our code to protect homes, structures, people, lives, et cetera, in the rural county. So the committee has a pretty tall task. They're going to begin by looking at the map. What is it? And then considering building standards, and holy smokes, are there a lot, no pun intended there, but there's a whole lot of issues that they're going to have to grapple with in that. And I know the City of Bend might discuss those as well. There's a lot of decision points. What does infill mean? Is it an existing subdivision? Is it a new subdivision? Where are they located? There's a lot of stuff to consider. So this is our current wildfire hazard map and zone. It's basically the entire county, and it really only addresses roofing standards. And so you can see this is our starting point, but the key is we have to update our map in order to apply these new standards based on this ODF, the Oregon Department of Forestry scoring criteria. And I had another slide, I took it out, but it had all the detailed the matrix basically. Between 0 and 3 points for each of these different categories, 3 being the highest number. And when it comes to weather, Deschutes County is a 3. The entire county across the board is a 3. But it also factors in slopes, fuel hazards, and fuel distribution. And we're very, very fortunate to have outstanding data in which to zero in on properties. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So the scores will range from 0 to 12 in Deschutes County, of course, from 3 to 12, and 7 or greater equals a wildfire hazard zone. That appears pretty clear, except the key question is what the state law says, the Oregon Department of Forestry criteria says, it is not the intent that wildfire hazard zones be determined on a tax lot or ownership specific basis, but rather a landscape approach be used. And it does not define what a landscape approach means. So that will be for each county to decide and determine as it sees fit. And that's the starting point for our conversation. So here's the raw data. As you look at the county across the board, and you can see as areas become more, beginning with yellow, but really the oranges and the reds, is where the greatest fire hazards are in the county. Of course, these are going to be the Cascades, where we have the steepest slopes, combined with the weather, combined with the vegetation, all of these factors combined. So how do we begin to apply this across the county? Well, we don't know at this point, and this is open for the committee to discuss. One approach that Ed Keith, our county forester, and community development we discussed was, let's look at our community wildfire protection plan areas, the CWPPs, and then within each community wildfire protection plan, there are subzones. So just as a starting point, here's one potential approach. And of course, this is the raw score. There are going to be a lot of questions in here. Do we look at the raw scores, Or do we round the scores? So a raw score is if it's 6.51, you're going to see it on this map in the 6.0 to 6.99 range, the scale on the right, you can't read it, I can barely read it right here. But if you were to take 6.51 and round that up, then you can see how that can dramatically change the scale of the map. So we have a lot of work to do in deciding what is the landscape approach. Is it do we look at cities and then buffer areas? Do we look at fire districts and other areas? Do we look at public and private and/or private lands? A lot of decisions to make at the very beginning of even where to apply the scores, and then what is the rounding mechanism to determine what the designation is, because it will have profound impacts on whether or not the building standards apply, the land use standards apply, et cetera. So that's a snapshot of where we're at. I'm happy to answer any questions.
At our last council meeting, there was some discussion about creating a map in addition to the one that the county was doing. So it appeared to me some kind of duplication of effort, and the suggestion was primarily that the map being developed by the county was inappropriate for assessing fire risk, which seems a little odd. Can you speak to that at all, and why our efforts can't be jointly done?
Well, I really can't speak to the city's efforts, but I know in the county's efforts, we certainly welcome city participation, fire official participation in our process from start to finish. We would encourage, of course, residents to apply, but we would expect certainly your fire officials, some in the room, and your building official and others to be integral to our process to help create our map. And then I think it would be up to the city if you chose to create a map on your own.
I'd ask maybe Bob Madden to come up and just talk about our process and just to clarify for the council in terms of the difference between kind of what the city's doing in the county.
That'd be good.
Wasn't the presentation?
I just didn't get it.
You can be like screwed.
We talk about the wildfire hazard mapping. This was put together with Senate Bill 360 with the Oregon Department of Forestry, and it's basically old science. There's been some new research that we feel we'd like to talk with Oregon Department of Forestry and with the county and with all of Central Oregon. Really, it's tri-county problem actually with public and private lands. The issue is, as we looked at the initial state maps, when you broke it down and depending on how we rounded things, areas that we know are severe wildfire hazard risks don't show as a high risk because there are structures in there. And the issue is, in this study, they didn't incorporate the structures as being fuel, which they are, and they contribute greatly to the spread of fire. So I think it's really important that we use the up-to-date science when we look at how we determine wildfire hazard zones for Central Oregon.
And could the county voluntarily do that with the mapping, or do they have to follow the ODF standards? So that is
the letter of this says wildfire hazard zones shall be determined using criteria established by the Oregon Department of Forestry. ODF is constantly evaluating, using new science, looking at it, but the only thing we have as far as on paper is the wildfire mapping from the Senate Bill 360, and that is pretty much what we use with our CWPPs.
Define fuel? Does it define fuel specifically as vegetation?
It defines different vegetative types, but it takes into account slope and all that. It doesn't take into account variations in climate. We have a climate class in Deschutes County that puts us at that 3 already. But there are also microclimate areas within there based on prevailing winds and topography that have to be incorporated into really determining a true risk for an area. Points of gap flow, things like that we can really look at, and we can show that by fuel regimes, by fire history, and by all of that. So we can get deeper into the science of determining that rather than saying, well, we've got pine trees here, we have brush here. It's a lot more complex than that.
But it still seems to me that we would want some kind of a joint exercise, because while I acknowledge that the county may have to make a map based upon certain standards. I assume that the county's interested in the actual fire danger to the best of our knowledge, whether or not it conforms to some regulation, and so why not do it together? It doesn't make sense.
We've begun having discussions with the county about how do we capitalize on the advisory board that's being formed, and to see if there's opportunities for efficiency and using some of the sort of brain power and kind of mix of kind of both the fire community and building community to see if there's some tools that we can adopt at the city level. So we've had some of those discussions already.
But it sounds like also what you're trying to do is say the Oregon Department of Forestry standards really should be changed. I mean, that's the bigger issue. They should be looking at more modern science to do these maps than what they're using. And we're saying if that's what the current law is for adopting this code is the old standards, is it? Yeah.
Well, if we go back to the Senate Bill 360, and Doug, you can add to this if I'm off base on it, but that was done 15, 20 years ago, and using the best science at the time. But since then, there's been a tremendous amount of research on how homes ignite in a wildland, the home ignition zone, and the dynamics of fire spread. And it's not the wildland fuel; it's the ember showers. It's this and that. And so we look at density of homes. We look at the homes themselves being part of the fuels that are involved in these types of fires. We have to incorporate all of that into that, and the new science is doing that. And this looks at vegetation, the slope, and the climate, and that's really just a huge broad brush look at a situation that I can look at certain areas within Central Oregon and know that particular community is at grave risk if we have a worst-case-scenario fire. I mean, a weather event with a fire occurring at the same time versus this subdivision over here. So we should be able to look at the landscape, but not at a very huge scale, but incorporate in all of the science of how fires spread from the forest to our communities, and vice versa. So it's really important to look at all of that.
I have a question. In looking at this, have we looked at other cities to model, such as like Carson City down in Nevada or Lake Tahoe in that area?
Yeah, we're looking at that, and probably one of the models that we've been looking at mostly has been Flagstaff, Arizona, because they're a more similar fuel type than some of the West Side Sierra type communities. Carson City is somewhat similar. They have more extreme weather events than we do. The Zephyr winds, but we look to some of the other communities that have been very successful with this, and it's not an easy road. We all have to determine, what is that going to take for us for infrastructure development, for codes, for affordability. All of those things have to come into play.
I guess my comment would be at the Fire Council, we had a really robust discussion, and sort of with the increased focus and investment statewide in making sure that the data and the science all come together so we can begin to sort of build on this information repository at Oregon State University. I mean, this is a huge focus. This is not a static conversation at all. So all the questions that I hear today are exceedingly relevant, and it's changing quickly. So I guess even the modeling. And so, but the other thing I will say is in Central Oregon specifically, we are doing as good or better a job as anywhere else in the state. So really to keep gathering on this work that's sort of emerging on the state level and some of the investments and focus in accelerating this forward.
We keep the energy, the cooperation amongst all the agencies and government jurisdictions, Project Wildfire, examples like that. We can keep moving forward, and I think that our community gets it. I think most of our homeowners get it, and we continue to educate and promote that.
It seems like if there were a single problem that makes you want a new map, it is not considering structures as fuel. It seems also that, so what about the origin of the fire, not just how it is spread? It sounds like the maps are being drawn with weather as a consideration because lightning starts fire, but so do people. Is there that interface between the humans starting the fire as well as the structures being fuel?
when I talk about weather, I don't mean the lightning starting the fire. You know, we know lightning starts fires, we know
Right.
people start fires.
Right.
When I talk about the weather, if
You're
you
trying-
look at a severe fire, what it is an extreme weather event. It's like a blizzard, it's like a tornado or a hurricane. All the cars line up, the fuels are ready, the topography is ready, and the weather says we're off to the races. And we react until the weather changes. So,
Okay.
so really, an extreme wildfire is an extreme weather event. That's how we have to look at it. And so how do we prepare ourselves? So in earthquake country, they do something. In tornado country, they do something. In hurricane country, they do something. We need to be approaching wildfires like that also when we develop our communities.
And then if I could just, I want to introduce our new fire chief, Todd Riley, who is going to be taking over for Chief Langston, who's sitting right next to him. Chief Langston is retiring in a few weeks. Just to welcome Chief Riley into the fold.
The chief looks like he's already retired.
Downloaded a book over there.
So I think we'll move on next to joint projects, and we're going to start with the solid waste management plan, and then talk about the Bend Municipal Airport after that. So, Tim, we're running a little bit late. I know that we're trying to get out of here by 3. It doesn't look like that may happen, but maybe if you could do 8 minutes instead of 10. And I know and I'm sure you prepared a 20-minute presentation, so we're going to do lots of downloads.
Just enough for everybody. I'm going to short you. There you go.
Yeah.
Since you've seen this numerous times.
And I've seen it too.
And just
So one of,
kind of go with the PowerPoint.
we can share. I've seen it. Just had a big presentation yesterday.
So as you probably have heard, Knott Landfill is expected to reach capacity in about 10 more years, 2029. That has kind of spurred this effort to look at the system. I mean, primarily, we're looking for a decision on what are we going to do after Knott Landfill, but we operate the system as an integrated solid waste management system. So all the components of the system, disposal, recycling, collection, transfer, composting, those all need to work together and going in the same direction. So a major change, like disposal, could impact many, if not all, of the other aspects of the system. So we look at it all together as we move ahead. The bottom of the first page there, this is the stated primary goal. Work cooperatively with cities and service providers to provide citizens and businesses an integrated solid waste management system that delivers quality and cost-effective services while achieving the best uses of our resources and reducing waste to the landfill. The next slide, so these next 2 slides are basically responses to kind of what I've heard from the community as I go around and give these talks, or if people email me. The first one on the transfer, a lot of people in the Bend area say, Knott Landfill is going to close, where am I going to have to go with my stuff after it's closed? Well, the short answer is nowhere different. All of our facilities will operate as they do now, even though landfilling may be happening somewhere else. You see there on that little map, there's a transfer station in Sisters, that's number 2, Redmond, number 3, down between Sun River and Lapine, number 5. Number 4 is a little tiny one by Alfalfa. And then, of course, number 1 is here in Bend, and there's a landfill there that will close, but there's also a fully functioning transfer station there, and so it will continue to be the receiving point for all the waste in the Bend area, even though the landfill may close. The next slide, the next slide, the other question I get is, boy, everybody's really excited and really hopeful that we can embrace technology to deal with our waste. And we looked at that very closely, both from how do we get more recyclables out of the system, and that's what that first picture shows, Advanced Material Recovery Facility. Basically, we rely on the generators to separate the recyclables and set them out or bring them to us separately. We still know there's a lot of material that goes into the landfill, so one approach is to actually sift through it. So with conveyors and screens and magnets, and I mean, there's some amazing technology out of there, robotics and artificial intelligence now that can separate those out. What we found is really that's all very, very expensive, and we're still relatively small. So you need a lot of tons to go through a system like that to make it cost effective. Similar situation with treating your waste to recover energy before it goes into the landfill. We look very closely at 6 or 7 specific different technologies that are out there. None of them are used extensively. They're all still very new, and again, very, very expensive. Typically, a cheap waste to energy process would be about $45 million in capital. and that compares to $14 million to site a new landfill. So it's much more expensive, and again, you have to have a lot of waste to justify that kind of expense, and we just don't have that. Now, we've set those technology solutions aside, but we will watch those closely every 3 to 5 years. Yes?
Would that be like a burner similar to what Marion County has? Is that what you're describing?
That's a really basic approach. That is the same concept, though. They extract the energy by incineration, but there's a number of other ways of going about that as well. So, again, I'm not here to say that we're not going to consider an alternative technology unless it's as cheaper than landfilling. That's not the case at all. But at the same time, doubling the cost of our disposal in order to pursue those we felt was too far, a step too far. And so again, we'll watch those technologies and expect over time that the cost will come down and they'll be sized more for our community. And I fully expect at some point in the future we'll incorporate some of that into our system. Just we're not sure when. The next slide is basically a breakdown of the recommendations. This is in general. There's actually 26 recommendations in the plan, but on the waste reduction and recycling side, we're relying on the generators to separate it for us. We'll continue to push that and try and expand services so we can get that. We're going to target food waste. State waste characterizations say that's an area where we can make inroads into waste. Multifamily dwellings are a real challenge to get recycling done there and get it done right. And so we recognize that there's going to be a lot more multifamily dwellings in Deschutes County over time. So a program to effectively get at those. Get more recycling out of businesses, both for recyclables as well as food waste. And this next one is even on a statewide level, they've recognized the value of a uniform standard approach. So the bins look the same, the messaging looks the same, so that if you're coming from the valley over into Central Oregon, you're familiar with what you see there, and we'll take advantage of the state's works in those areas as well. They're doing the same thing for multifamily dwellings too. We'll take advantage of their efforts there. And then being a high growth area, construction and demolition waste, we want to target that. The state average says there's roughly 32% of that in the waste stream. We think it's higher in Deschutes County given our high growth. So we think there's potential to divert a lot more material out of there. And then down at the bottom is we're talking about our facilities. As we add food waste into the compost program, there may be the need to upgrade the compost operation to help deal with the issues that can develop there. Transfer stations, of course, we looked at them because if we're going to ship our waste to the Willamette or to the Columbia River, our transfer stations need to look quite a bit different. You need to get compaction. You just handle your waste differently if you're going a long haul. But we also kind of recognize that our transfer station, particularly in Redmond, is way beyond capacity. It needs to be improved, rebuilt, and we are in the process. We've got dollars in this budget to design it, and we expect to construct it next year. Developing facilities for the C&D, I talked about that already, and of course implementing a new disposal system. The next slide there just points out the cost that we estimate is costing us to operate non-landfill, about $35 a ton. And we think that we can operate a new landfill somewhere within 30 miles of Bend for about the same cost per ton. It's important, we have a tip fee of $55 a ton, but it's important when you're looking at disposal options, you don't want to be comparing that option to $55 a ton, only what our disposal costs are. I'm talking really fast, hang in there with me.
Doing great.
So setting technology aside, we're looking at two options. We either contract for disposal outside of the county, or we site a new landfill in the county. And the regional side, early on, Crook County stepped up and said, we have a landfill and we might be willing to work with you on your needs. So looking at that shipping out, including Crook County has a site at their waste flow, which is about 35,000 tons a year. They have capacity for 100 years of life. But if you take our 180,000 tons a year and combine it with their 35, that 100-year site quickly becomes a 15-year site, and that's not acceptable to them or us. But they are a potential outlet for some diversion. So if we go down the path of trying to site a new landfill and it's taking longer than expected and we need to get more life out of that landfill, we could divert some waste up to Crook County in order to buy some time.
Jared? sorry to interrupt you, but we have to get done by 3, so why don't you you've prepared a lot of nice information in the packet. They'll be able to take that with it, kind of summarize the conclusions we came to about the two options and what we're doing. And
So on page 9, there are 2 slides. Right, sort of
yeah,
pop forward. And we're
sorry.
going to post all of these presentations online as well for people to get the detail. So,
Sorry, we're.
Yeah. So if you
So if you go to page 8, there you see basically the chart that we put together comparing in-county versus out-of-county based on a number of criteria. Number 1, ease of implementation. This is where the out-of-county option shines. You don't need land use approval, you don't need a DEQ permit, you negotiate a contract and away it goes. And that land use permit and DEQ permit can be very, very difficult and contentious. So that gives the advantage to out-of-county. Sound financial principles, revenues and jobs, I estimate about $10 million a year will flow out of this county if we ship it out, or that would stay in the county if we go inside the county. That's an advantage to in-county. It is cheaper in-county here. I pointed out $35 a ton is what we expect to operate the landfill. There's an additional $7 a ton in that $42 figure you see there for transporting 30 miles out. But that's still cheaper than transporting to the Columbia River Gorge.
We have to conclude.
Okay?
So the other option is?
Basically, the analysis here points to an in-county landfill. That's what the plan recommends. I point out that we've had a couple of public meetings. We have surveys that have been on our website for a while. Everything indicates that about 80% in those surveys, people recommend keeping a landfill in the county. Phil had a concern that self-selecting survey, you're hearing from people who have some knowledge and some interest, but he wanted a broader spectrum, so we conducted a statistically valid telephone survey, 500 responses, and that survey said that over 90% of the people said you should build a new landfill in the county.
So I think we'll have to stop there. Tim has indicated kind of where the next steps are. We're in the process of, this will come to us. We've got the actual full plan. We'll be looking at that, asking questions in the next couple of weeks. We'll be approving a plan fairly shortly and then be moving forward. So for other questions, we'll have to get to them.
The website is on the last page there. The plan is posted there. You can go see the whole plan or the executive summary, and you can look at the surveys as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next topic's the Bend Municipal Airport. Thanks, Tim. You've got 2 minutes. No.
Good afternoon,
We'll try to-
Commissioners and Councilor. I'm Carolyn Egan. I serve as the City of Bend's Economic Development Director, and as part of that position, I have the privilege of managing and working with Gary Judd at the Bend Airport. You are all familiar with the airport. This is, if you were to approach from the FBO, this is what you see of the airport, but you remember that north is actually on the left side of your screen and south is on the right side of your screen. The middle part there, the biggest part of asphalt is actually runway 1634, and the Bend Municipal Airport accommodates loads and loads of air traffic operations. We are the 3rd busiest airport in the state of Oregon and one of the busiest GA-only airports in the West. And so when I say 3rd busiest, we're busier than the Redmond Commercial Airport. So just for clarification there, we have some land that's available for development. We are going through a very rigorous FAA master plan process right now, which staff at the county have been very involved in. I really appreciate their time that they're giving to that master plan. What the master plan's telling us, though, is that we are going to have to extend runway 1634 by about 50%, and then build a second runway at the Bend Municipal Airport in the next 20 years to be able to accommodate current and future demand at the airport.
Is that, when you're, that 1634, is there more than one?
There are 2 taxiways. So the taxiway B to the north and A to the south, I think if I got it, or yep, east and west. But the primary one is, you can see 1634 right there.
Somewhere with the dash lines.
Yep,
the
with
white
dash lines, that's
Okay.
the runway. And then the taxiways and the taxi lanes run east-west there. What we're finding with the air with the master plan is the extension of the existing runway and then the new runway. We have basically 4 areas. We look at the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, and then an east alignment. So the gray area there is all municipally owned or publicly owned land, and then the white on the map is privately owned land. And so in most of the cases for the runway extension, you start seeing that there's publicly owned land available, except for when we start going southeast. And so as we talk about extending the existing runway, building a new runway, building the aviation-related uses and the commercial and industrial land that will be required to continue to support this airport as it grows, we're really interested in working directly with the county to figure out what does the future of land use, jurisdiction, and land use authority look like at the Bend Airport. You can imagine in Oregon, we think that Oregon land use law is the most important thing. And funnily enough, when we talk to the FAA, they could care less about Oregon land use law. And they don't care about EFU designations or MUA or whatever. They don't care about those things. They're like, build your airport. So we're dealing with what makes sense to not only protect the aviation-related uses that'll be required, but also really protect the adjacent residential uses that are required in Deschutes County. So our request today is that to look at this timeline. So what we're looking at right now is that the master plan will be adopted in 2020. That will have to do the required environmental assessments that should be completed in 2021. And then we would really like to be embarking on a process with the county to figure out what the right future jurisdictional authority and land use authority makes sense for the future of the airport. So things that have been discussed with the county planning staff are annexation, some sort of airport overlay. There are probably 5 or 6 different land use ways that we can deal with development at the Bend Airport. What I'd love to do is get together, have a joint group, look at these things. And the question is why now? Largely because we can't continue to support the demand that's coming from all over the country at our airport with the current way that we have the land use running. So we'd really like to figure out what makes the most sense. One of our concerns long-term is the long-term financial stability of the Bend Airport. So what we're looking for is maybe 2 elected officials, some legal staff from both jurisdictions, some high-level planning staff. The work plan would basically be able to explore all the land use options, do some risk and benefit analysis to all of those, and then come back to this group at a future meeting with a recommendation on how to proceed. We're not talking about initiating UGB expansions tomorrow. The soonest we would really be able to do that would be in 2021 after that environmental assessment's done. So this is really pre-planning work on both ends so that we would be ready for our biennial budgets in 21, 23.
So I've been invited to be involved a few times, but then we're in a spot where if this ends up being a land use application, we are the governing body for, the process and the appeals or whatever. So I think we've been in kind of a catch-22 with wanting to promote this. So this is a good time to lay this out here. I've heard that request, please come be part of our process, but then we get guidance that, well, no, this is going to be land use in the end, and we got to watch out for it. So I'm just laying that on the table here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I would see it is that it's more of a legislative issue than it is a land use quasi-judicial decision, because there's enough going out there with private landowners. Because the odd thing is that the city owns and operates the airport, but yet it's in the county's jurisdiction. So you have the city-owned property, there's county property, there's other governmental properties out there, there's private property, and so it really needs a legislative look instead of just the city can't go out there and be the applicant per se with all these different landowners, and so it needs a legislative look, and I think that's what this process would lay out.
Well, yeah, as I say, I'm available, but it's been kind of should I or shouldn't I? So if we can get clarity today, that'd be great. And other commissioners.
Well, we'll probably have to
too,
talk about it, yeah. Because we haven't really, this is the first time we've heard that I've heard what the direction is. So, yeah, we can take this back and talk about it.
So I think that we're looking for, and it maybe if you want to do that at your meeting and just get back to us, but we would like to see a representative from the county board, and then I think in the same time, the council would do that. We would form a bit of a work group to work through these issues.
And I'm not sure, Tony, that I totally understand your question as to why you wouldn't be allowed to be involved in a work group about what the future might look like.
So again, I'm referring to the Bend Airport Master Plan, I guess.
Oh, yeah, so that,
Yeah.
we're not talking about the Bend Airport Master Plan at all. We're really talking about the land that will be, so one of thank you for
Yeah, so that's why
clarifying.
I was starting.
Okay, so what the Airport Master Plan will give us is it will give us an airport layout plan. And what that will tell us is this is where the runways go, and then these are the lands that need to be sort of protected, or that the FAA assumes that we're gonna protect to build those runways, and then the adjacent aviation uses. That airport layout plan does not care who owns the land that these runways are being drawn on top of. So we get the airport layout plan, and that's what starts to help us understand just the pure massing of properties around the airport that they would need to be rezoned or redesignated or any type of thing. The city may need to acquire some of those properties to be able to build out our master plan. So given we have this sort of edict from the FAA that we build out these runways in a certain way, what's the proper way to think about the land under those runways? That's what I'm asking the group to look at.
We'll discuss it when we're next meeting.
And we're happy at any time.
Get some
with
more background,
Commissioner
yeah.
And Peter to provide information as you need it from
Okay.
our standpoint and our timelines.
Yeah, good, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna
And
move.
then, yeah, our plan for the next item, I'll just cover it in 1 minute, and that's just Bend is updating its transportation system plan. We're gonna forego the presentation, we'll put it in the packet, but it's our look at what our transportation system needs are up until 2040. And it's about halfway through the process. It'll be concluded this spring. Commissioner DeBonne sits on our steering committee. We have a whole sort of governance process that includes the county planning commission, ODOT, as part of the decision-making at looking at that plan. As a part of that, we are looking at funding. How do we fund that plan into 2040? And there's many different tools to fund it. One of the things that council's interested in looking at is perhaps a request of the voters, a general obligation bond, to be put forward, advanced to the voters this spring. So over the next couple of months, we'll be looking at a package of projects that helps accomplish that. Kind of looks at what are those projects that help move the needle and put us in a good position over the next 20 years. So a lot of that discussion will take place with the council and with the steering committee, et cetera. But those are the big highlights.
So we'll move on to the last item under joint projects is the Highway 97 infra grant, ODOT briefing. So this is a nice thing to kind of cap our updates. This has been a big success with all the jurisdictions working together to finally get the last piece of it. So Gary Farnsworth's here from ODOT to bring us all up to speed on what's next.
Absolutely. Gary Farnsworth, the Region 4 Manager, and hi everyone, and I want to thank many of you around the table and some in the room for the success we had with the infra grant. $60 million is a nice amount to bring into the area, into the community. Under tough times, I think financially, as far as funding that's available, state and federal, for projects like this. We did have the House Bill 2017 a few years ago, which was great, but mostly to deal with most repair, maintenance, and those safety activities. This is really more of a modernization type project that is desperately needed in Central Oregon, and we're so happy to be able to move it forward. The expectation is we would be able to start construction in about 2022. Between now and then, we'll be acquiring property. In fact, we are now in the process of acquiring lands along the corridor and designing and getting ready for construction. We expect to use a design-build contract to keep us fast-tracked. It was also one of our commitments around some innovation that we'll use, and more to come on that. We're looking at the $60.4 million we received from the infra grant against what will need to be about $73 million in state match. We have most of that and still working on a few pieces around that to get there. The expectation is we'll need to have all of the match funding in about 2021 to keep everything moving forward. There's also a lot of potential there, a lot of development interest in the area as well, and there may be opportunity for more. In our application, we had identified also a periphery of improvements around the area, including the extension of Hunnell Road, which the county has. along with some other improvements that all tie in and fit into the area. So we're super excited about what this is going to do for just transportation in general, but also for the economy in the area. So super excited, and I'm very thankful for all the help that we've received so far. I have a few other details, but I'd rather just see if there's any quick questions.
But I just think with all three parties here that it's a time to acknowledge how we all came together on the particular project. So it was funded by the federal government, but it also took county funds and city funds and then the state match on top of it. I mean, it really is a major accomplishment on all of our parts to get this project done.
A meeting of the minds, too. We were all able to rally around something in a tough climate and pull it off. So I want to appreciate, or show my appreciation for those that contributed to that. Thank you.
Thank you, congratulations.
Work to come. We're expecting, speaking of the partnerships, we expect to move forward mid-fall to get staff together between city, county, and ODOT to work a lot of the specifics around how we're going to manage decisions forward and how we're going to manage schedule, our ongoing communication with public and stakeholders. So we'll be putting together a pretty robust plan to make that happen, make sure we've got everything fit well, and look for opportunities.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the update. We're excited about it.
All right. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Nice job, everyone. Just want to take a moment to thank my colleagues on council and city staff for their contribution on all, I mean, you look at this list and all the things that we're engaged and involved in, and staff for helping pull this together, and our colleagues at the county and staff also for all this work. And I really, from my point of view as a mayor of Bend, I really look forward to more conversations and finding more ways to really take, sort of like we did on our subcommittees, which is just to sort of begin to look at those areas where we really do have equal but different responsibilities, and make sure that we work more closely together to really bring products into our community that keep us ahead of the growth and the changes that we can see moving forward. So thank you.
I'll just reiterate, thank you all for coming today. Thanks for all our staff and city staff for joining us. We hope we can get those PowerPoints that we didn't get to see. It'd be nice to get the videos for those, and we can have that information, because I'm sure it'd be helpful. Try to get that improved by next time. Thanks for all of you for coming. Thanks for helping organize it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Adjourn.
Yeah, thanks.